Excuse me, how far is Cambridge away from here?
What is it, Enos? About 20 miles?
About that.
Camp Mud. You're opening that place again?
The idea for Friday the 13th came out of, actually, need and desperation. Steve Miner and I and Victor Miller had all been working on a couple of children's films over the past 2 years, and the most recent was a soccer film. And we had not been successful getting a distributor. And I had decided that I had to make some kind of a movie and thought of the notion of doing a movie called Friday the 13th. I didn't know what the movie was going to be, but the idea of the title intrigued me. I had talked to Steve Miner about it, and the two of us thought that we liked the title a lot, but we didn't have any idea if we could use it, so we did the only thing that we thought was sensible at the time, and which is to say we announced that we were going to make it. We took out a big ad on something like the 4th of July in Variety, saying, Friday the 13th, the most terrifying film ever made. Based on that ad, I turned around and was able to get enough interest to get the film produced, or get enough money to get the film produced. The only problem was I didn't have a script or a start date. I talked to Victor Miller, and he came over to the house, and we had worked together on a couple of other things, mostly softer, gentler kids' films and things like that, and decided, how would you like to try to make a scary movie called Friday the 13th? And he said, I don't know, I've never really made a scary movie before, I don't know how we're going to do it. And I said, well, I'm not sure either, but let's figure it out. We sat down at the kitchen table and started to create this thing that became Friday the 13th. The assumption was, Victor's notion was to start with those little things that scared you as a kid. You know, you think there's somebody under the bed. You know, globally, I had discovered in some of my reading that the purpose of the effective story like this was to make you comfortable with your fears. And that as children, we get fairy tales. And the purpose of fairy tales, which are sometimes just bizarre, is to take a child's fears and put it in the safety of a story and tell it. And each time you take it out of this dark recesses of your mind and look at it as a story, then it becomes more accessible. Then it becomes easier to deal with, and then you put it back away. What I was trying to deal with was the notion that every teenager deals, I think, with the fear of untimely death. And it usually shows up sometime in high school when there is a kid who gets on a motorcycle and runs into a tree, or there's a car accident or something, and suddenly, you know, the entire high school almost shuts down because we operate in high school with a sense of invulnerability. All bad things happen to them, but never to us. And when we get faced with that I call it the fear of untimely death, it's very distressing. And this was sort of like the watchword of where we were going to go with the film, is just to deal with this notion of untimely, unwarranted death. It wasn't meant to be a morality tale. It wasn't meant to be, well, if you get mixed up with sex or drugs, bad things will happen to you. That was never part of my original notion of the film. It was that bad stuff happens, we know it, let's take a look at it, and it'll be a little less scary. It wasn't any more complicated than that.
This is Markson coming in. Welcome to Camp Crystal Lake. Thank you.
When we decided to cast the film, we had never efficiently used a casting agent before. And we were fortunate enough to run into Barry Moss and Julie Hughes, who are pretty much Broadway casting agents in New York. And they just supported it and believed in this project from the get-go. And they brought in every young actor that they could find in New York.
The casting people on this, Barry Moss and Julie Hughes, were just amazing theatrical casting people. And so once they were casting a film, I think it was their first film too, everyone was like, whoa, this is going to be something. You know, right from the start, right from the get-go, we knew it was special.
Well, I'm Mrs. Voorhees, an old friend of the Christies.
Trying to find somebody to play the mother was a real task because you didn't, with any luck, we could use, again, some misdirection. Betsy Palmer, at the time, had a career as being sort of like a peaches and cream, sort of Katie Couric, just the nicest person in the world in her life. And that was her whole public persona. So when Betsy Palmer shows up in the movie, at least in 1980, she seems like a nice person. She's not a threat. Nobody was expecting her to be a threat. It certainly was playing against type.
I was on Broadway at the time, and I was doing Same Time Next Year. And the trip home in the car usually is an hour and 15 minutes at the longest. And my old Mercedes, which I'd had for a number of years, just broke down. It stopped, stalled on the road. And so I said to myself, so, I need a new car. I said, universe, okay, can you see to it? So this was on a Tuesday. And on Friday, my agent called and he said, how would you like to do a movie? And I said, great. I said, I haven't done a film since the 1960s. He said, it's 10 days work, $1,000 a day. And I said, great. I said, I just looked at a Scirocco. It cost $9,999.50 or whatever. Perfect, that'll be great. He said, there's only one drawback. He said, it's a horror film. I said, oh, no.
Kill her, Mommy. Kill her.
I said, but, well, I need the car. Send me the script. So they sent me the script. I read it. I said, what a piece of crap. Little stronger words, but I said, nobody is ever going to see this thing. So I said, okay, I'll do it.
Kill her, Mommy. Kill her. Don't let her get away, Mommy. Don't let her live.
I won't, Jason. I won't.
A good director listens to everybody. Maybe doesn't do what everybody says, but listens to everybody because a good director realizes that one person can't think of everything. It's like brainstorming. I suggest something to you, you say something back, and what evolves is something that would not have evolved if just one person is thinking of it. So that was good. So if we came to him with a suggestion of something, he'd give you his attention, and if it was great, great. If it wasn't, it wasn't used,
I said to Sean Cunningham at one point in time when we were shooting, I said, you're being very unfair about this film. I said, you're not even giving anybody a loose clue that I'm in the scene. I said, you should put me in that little restaurant or at a stoplight in my Jeep or whatever, just a flash somewhere. He said, no. He said, just let him guess. It's all right.
Hello? Who's that? Oh, hi. What are you doing out in this mess?
Because, it lets you use your imagination. That's what was really wonderful about a lot of it.
Like the first two kids in the movie. We should kill them gloriously, but you don't see anything happen to them. Which makes when something does happen, more of a shock, especially when it's so visceral and so bloody. Because at the beginning of the movie, when nothing happens to these kids, you're thinking, okay, well, I can deal with that. It's not that scary, They're not going to shock me too bad. But from the next death on, it was like, oh my God, if they're going to show us that, they're going to build, what's the end going to be like, which was glorious, with Betsy Palmer's head coming off, Jason coming out of the water. So it did not disappoint, obviously.
I have been in stores marketing, shoving the cart around. And all of a sudden I've heard behind me,
Harry Manfredini and I had worked together on 2 films before Friday the 13th. And Harry, besides being a terrific musician, is sort of an equipment junkie. And they had just invented certain kinds of synthesizers. And we were working on the music in New Jersey, and it was one of those things you could do, like echo reverbs and things like that. You can buy them now at Kmart for $29.95. But it was a really big deal kind of piece of equipment. And he was fooling around with this sense of, and then it would just sort of repeat and making different sounds. And he finally came up with his signature sound, which then went through this electronic process, which, as I say now, is really easy and it's a cliche, but it just hadn't occurred before. And Harry just, again, he got it right, and it was just one of those things that worked so well.
Oh, my sweet, innocent Jason. My only child. Jason. You let him drown. You never paid any attention. Look what you did to him. Look what you did to him.
We had very high ambitions for the fight. We didn't think, or didn't even know, that we could have used stunt people at all. In fact, we didn't. There were no stunt people in the movie because that's for a different kind of movie making.
We all did everything ourselves. I mean, what you saw was what we did. We got bruised and battered, and Betsy had my hair and smacking my face into the sand, and she really was strong, and it was real,
I think that Sean had it scheduled the way we were going to shoot it, but it was still a long, long time being out there in that way and working, and we really wrestled and tussled on the beach.
By the time you've been shooting all night and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you're like a little, you're just so beat that whatever happens just happens, and if somebody starts grabbing you start fighting back. I mean, it's survival in any case. It was just, it was real.
It turned out fine in the end, but my goodness, it was hard. And, we were shooting at night, and it was getting cold, and we spent the next 2 nights, I believe, doing stuff that I thought we were going to be able to get done in 2 or 3 hours. It took a long time to get it right. At the very end of the movie, we had revealed that the murderer was Betsy Palmer and that she had been vanquished. And now what we were looking for is one extra bump, one extra twist. And how could we do it? How could we make it work? And out of that came the notion of Jason jumping out of the lake. And, of course, I said, well, how can Jason jump out of the lake? Jason's dead. That is not consistent with the rest of this movie, because the rest of this movie was meant to be reality-based, and I didn't know how we were going to do it. And then he said, well, we'll set it up so that Jason comes out of the lake, and then what's really happening is we say, oh, it's a nightmare. So you had a double thing. But from the audience's point of view, it was, again, setting up the major misdirection. So you have the big fight, and suddenly it's over. And everything about the next series of shots was to give the audience the comfort that the movie was now over. And I also, tiny little piece, I had in the background, you can see the police are arriving. It's safe now. It's all of that stuff from the night before. It's all over. The police are coming. And then Harry Manfredini had understood this perfectly, and he figured out the music to just make you feel so good. And at the moment in time that the Jason creature comes out of the lake, There's a moment in time in the music that it was the least expected. It wasn't building to a certain point. It was just the least